Amendment 76 in the name of my noble friends on the front bench. And as I've reminded noble lords before, I've sat on the planning committee many times. I've appointed the committee as a leader of a council and the chairman, and I know it's a very important quasi-judicial position. And my lords, planning exists to arbitrate between the public good and the private interest. And I use the word arbitrate purposely because people who sit on the planning committee have a difficult job. They've got to weigh up so much conflicting information, and it's an adversarial system because ultimately either the proposer wins or the objector wins. There's no sort of grey purpose in the middle. Now, much of this bill is established under the false premise that local planning committees are the blockers of development, and it's only with the ranks of officials that we can get things going. And of course, it's rubbish. And my evidence for that assertion is given by the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom this morning, where the Supreme Court this morning ruled that governments and quangos that had asserted that Ramsar sites had an equivalence to European sites and thus had to have a full environmental assessment. That was wrong, and they overturned it on that narrow point. But what do we have? The officials, the Treasury solicitors, within an hour, boasting how this bill is going to turn that round and reinstall that unnecessary gold plating. Gold plating that after 4 years, the Court of Appeal ruled shouldn't have happened. So the government's suggestion that ministers should usurp planning committees and instead form a national planning committee amongst themselves, so to speak, in Malsham Street is as fanciful as it is risible. It's a recipe for hurry up and slow down, and it's not as if fooling anybody that's going to speed up development. And of course, the premise is that officialdom brings none of their own particular either personal or institutional prejudices to bear. No, each quango brings its own vetoes. We have Natural England with a track record of leaving no stone unturned in blocking or delaying development. We've got the railways who will ballast every proposal for a new footbridge with £5 million worth of cost and preposterous delays. We've got the highway authorities that tie themselves in knots, overly precious technical guidance and misdirecting themselves that the private motor car is intrinsically bad, when it isn't. And that's before we get to the other bad actors, which time does not permit me to list. Look, I do not deny the importance of these quango representations, but the problem is they all claim a veto, and it's from this as we've got the £100 million bat bridge. It's all that mitigating trade in greater crested natterjack newts, which are rare in Europe, but are commonplace in every pond in my electoral ward in Norfolk. It's the way that planning works that it only takes us one of these proverbial black balls, these vetoes, from one of the statutory consultees to stymie a proposal. And this is why we need planning committees. We need planning committees to cut through this nonsense. In my experience, the committees, and especially those ones appointed by myself, appointed by accountable councillors, do more to get Britain building than the faceless dead hand of the state, each member of which is watching each other's back in some sort of bureaucratic conspiracy to slow things down. We need elected people, local councillors, who know their patch, who can see a self-serving veto or spurious objection from a quango when we see one. We need people on the ground who know the importance of building homes, economies and places that enhance lifestyles. And that's why my noble friend's amendment is so welcome and so necessary. And this, coupled with the other amendments in this bill that would fetter and restrict judicial review. And I note my noble friend Lord Banner isn't in his place, but it's his recommendations I'm referring to there. It's the right thing to get to the nub of Amendment 76, that the Chair of Planning should be able to revisit an officialdom's otherwise fatal objections to get it to committee so that the local champions can take all the evidence into account, to listen carefully to objections, but to balance that public and private interest and to get Britain building, not pander to self-serving quangos who are only interested in pursuing their own ideologies to the exclusion of all else.